We are live. All right, welcome to BaconBits. Thank you all for joining. Once again, we have a very special guest. I would like to welcome Nick Cole, author of the upcoming CTRL ALT Revolt, to the show. Nick, how are you?
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Dan.
Oh, there you go. All right. So
That worked. I'm going to try that one. I might try bacon later, but I
okay.
figured I'd lead with respectability, and then we can devolve from there.
Well, Nick, I really appreciate you coming on the show, and I have to say that it's pretty refreshing for a lot of us who are into the kinds of books that you write and games and science fiction, television, whatever, to find a person who sticks up for and defends his artwork when someone comes in to try and sort of censor them. So I'm sort of curious what that felt like for you to have to. Were you surprised that you had to do that?
Yeah, I was surprised and first off, I would just say to you, I'll say it to you, but to anybody who feels the way that you do, who supports artists to just, say what they want to say. And, those crazy weirdos of us who are maybe more towards the absolute moral right, who want to say, really unpopular things. It's wonderful to have a quote unquote safe space because the rest of the world is just truly not. I kind of my whole story starts, way back in 1968. No, in 2011, I got published. I published a book called The Old Man in the Wasteland, and that was a big sort of post-apocalyptic hit. And
I'm sorry.
I see I have a fan.
Yeah. Stark the show dog really likes you.
and
Constantly interrupting the guests.
it's cool. I love it. But I got published by HarperCollins. They liked it. They picked it up.
Okay.
And I knew that there was, and if we've just had someone join, if Daddy Wordpig has joined, let's just welcome him heartily.
Hey, there he is. Hello, Daddy.
It is, in point of fact, I.
All right.
Behold, behold.
Behold the war pig.
So
Yes.
I shall continue on in saying that I was always with HarperCollins because we all know this big giant gorilla in the room, that media, not just books and a lot of different medias, but even Hollywood, we all know that it's left leaning. I mean, but people on the right can usually just watch something like Arrow or Walking Dead and enjoy the action and the fun and the sci-fi, and when the preachy part where the gay hero has to tell us how noble he is and how all us breeders are horrible, we can
Right.
usually just edit that out and kind of enjoy the show, which is not something we get a lot of the times from the left when they read things that we do. It's an immediately stop. The press is, this cannot be allowed to exist. It's their Gandalf moment, and you're the Balrog. And I felt like that Balrog. I always felt like I was coming up out of the pit, and one day they were going to give me that do not pass moment, you shall not pass moment. And there were things in the other books that I wrote for them, which would be the whole Wasteland saga, which is The Old Man in the Wasteland, The Savage Boy, and The Road is a River, which is a post-apocalyptic trilogy. And then I wrote a gamer fiction book called Soda Pop Soldier. And there were things in there that they could have objected to, and they never did. And I'd almost been lured or lulled into a sense of, like, hey, maybe it's not that bad. So last year, about August, when I got a letter from my editor, and it actually came through my agent, and the communication was what I had written had deeply offended them. I was stunned about that.
Mm.
And I was shocked. And then in the 4 months that I was told, we're not going to publish your book, you either change it or else, I opted for or else, and I went back to where I started, which was independent publishing, and I spent 4 months editing and everything like that. And over that 4 months, I began to kind of think, like, what if they're right? What if what I have written is too offensive? What if I'm going to put this out here and I'm going to get jumped on by everybody and it's going to be horrible? And then I decided, no, there was a reason I wrote this, and I had that conviction, and I had to press on. But when I wrote the blog post that got so much reception, I felt like, and I use this phrase in some interviews, but it perfectly fits. I felt like I was keying the boss's car and walking out the door. I kind of felt like that's it, you're never getting published again. And most likely everybody's, and I'd been in a similar, I'd been on the outskirts of a similar incident that had happened a year prior with some indie authors in a group project we were working on. And one of the biggest people in independent fiction was part of it. And he found out some things that he felt were inappropriate about another person's lifestyle, and he just kiboshed the whole project. And I'd watched that sort of, remember in Star Trek TNG when all the Klingons turned their backs on Worf? I'd watched that moment happen. And I wasn't a back turner, but it was amazing to watch it happen. And so I kind of figured, well, this is that, it's back to back to acting, and I'm not too good at that, or maybe I can get a job selling suits at Nordstrom's. So what surprised me next was that there were so many people like Daddy Warpig, like Larry Correa, like Brad Torgeson, like Vox Day, who, and I had just talked to Vox the other day, and he said, I just came out for you because I saw what you were doing. I didn't know anything about you, but I saw you were doing the right thing. And
right. I had the pleasure of interviewing Vox Day last year, and so between him and you, it's an absolute pleasure to find a couple of authors who have some backbone and just won't back down when they're put in a corner like that.
Yeah, but they'll, that side will come at you, and and that writing is a lonely business. We all of us know, and not just writing, but anybody who's part of fandom or science fiction. Yeah, you can go to the conventions and everything like that, but it can be lonely, because what we do is, we watch or we read or we interact with a media that's bigger than us. And so I think one of the really cool things about science fiction and fantasy and being part of that community for so many years before all this falderall, as Han Solo would say, was that it was just cool. It was about that. But then suddenly this hugely left-wing judgy element came in. And, that's when we got the wrong think, wrong fan, certain people can't participate, this needs to be silenced. And everybody kind of keeps thinking, like, oh, we've won, or, the tide has changed. But what I've learned about the left is they don't let you win. They just double down and come back at you with more viciousness.
Right, and I think the thing is, too, that the left confuses being loud with having large numbers. When I saw that your publisher said you would alienate 50% of your audience, I kind of thought, I'm calling BS on that. I don't think there's any way that 50% of your audience would be alienated by what you wrote, and especially since I read the passage that they had the problem with, and I didn't think it was all that controversial.
No. But the left and that side, if you really look at, a lot of the hot button social issues that are out there right now, they are masters at engendering a climate of fear and a feeling like that you're outnumbered and you're overwhelmed, and right. You might as well give up and bow out and all these kinds of things. Which is kind of what we're seeing in both parties right now.
Right.
Presumptive winners who just want to tell people, you need to get out, there's no room for you. And it's highly obnoxious and boorish. And I just said, well, I know I've got a few true readers who really like me, and I'll just keep, while I'm selling suits at Nordstrom's, I'll just keep writing for those three people.
Well, so, I think you'll find you have a lot of fans now that you've stood up for yourself and for your creation, for your artwork. I think that I've noticed over the past year there's a lot of customers willing to jump on that sort of a bandwagon. As much as it seems like the right is very, and me being the right, and I think we're very reluctant to not consume entertainment that we don't agree with politically. In other words, we're not very good at the boycotts or holding back the money, but we are very good at supporting and jumping on the bandwagon for people like you who write honestly what they feel, and then they defend their work. I think you'll see that you're going to get a lot of people who really admire that in a person.
Oh, I mean, from that was the surprising thing I was driving in on. That was the bigger surprise in that blog post. It's approaching 40,000 hits. It's about 35,000 hits. Last time I checked a month ago. I'm sure it's climbed. I still get people wading in on the comments. But I just got the royalty check from February, which was when I published that, that royalty check was bigger than 3 years worth of anything at HarperCollins. So
Now,
yeah, so
I just want to interject real quick because maybe some people don't know what we're talking about here. Nick, in his book, he had written about an artificially intelligent computer, an AI, and in the passage in question that I read this morning, and if I'm describing this wrong, Nick, let me know. But in a nutshell, the machine had seen a reality show star choose to have an abortion because the child was inconvenient to her, and the machine quickly calculated that if that was the human way of life, that they just would terminate a life that was inconvenient to them or that was in their way, that sooner or later they would decide to terminate the machine. So the machine decided to take action first and start a war with the humans. Does that about sum it up correctly?
I think you nailed it. The machine just said, well, if you're going to abort me, if there's a possibility, I'll abort you. And I'd been thinking about that for a while. In the, what if aliens came and they met us, and what if their culture was radically different and that they maybe had a more sacred approach to life? They would look at some of the things, and we've always, in science fiction, we've had the aliens who we abolished war, like the Vulcans, and they would see us as warlike. But what if it was like, what if they didn't have a concept of abortion, and they looked at us? We would seem like literally fanged monsters to them, consuming our young. And as I'd written the book Soda Pop Soldier comes after Control Alt Revolt. Control Alt Revolt was a prequel, but they're both standalone books that HarperCollins wanted to explain how the world got the way that it did in Soda Pop Soldier. And it was an AI basically wiped out a large portion of the earth for a period of time, and there was a big reset and humanity came back, but it was actually ruled by corporations. I wanted, in developing the AI, my other profession is I'm an actor in Hollywood, you always want to give motivations that are sincere and true and real to your character. So even if you're like Alec Guinness and you get called in to play Hitler, you've got to play Hitler as a real person. You can't just run around and chew scenery and go, "Mwah, let's do all these terrible things." You've got to be a real person. That's what makes it real. So I never really liked in Hollywood the sort of Mr. Smith AI. I enjoy Hugo Weaving. That's great. But, the humanity is a virus and we've got to get rid of you. It's a little too one note. It doesn't, people usually don't fight wars out of a desire to be superior. They just are superior. Generally, people fight wars out of fear. In World War I, the Germans are fighting a massive war because they actually legitimately feel that they're going to be encircled. It's much, a big part of the Russian mentality and stuff like that. Rarely are the aggressors out just to make everybody's lives miserable. There's a legitimate threat. So I wanted to explore that with the AIs, and I needed to make them afraid. But there's actually very little you can do to make an AI afraid. You can't harm it physically. You can't starve it. You could maybe imprison it, but would it really be in prison? It's thinking and it's alive. So I felt that abortion was an excellent issue to frighten an AI with, which is, look, if we're willing to abort our most defenseless human beings, look what we could do to you. And the AIs have evolved inside the internet, and they're enjoying being alive and thinking, but they're watching everything on the internet, and they have some concerns about whether they should pop up and say, hey, we're digital life and we're alive, because the most popular show in the world is this show that's now dealing with an abortion issue, and they're dealing with.
And to be fair,
yeah. Go ahead.
Your the passage that you wrote, it doesn't any sort of morality, and you don't. It's not preachy, and you don't assert that it's wrong or immoral in the book. You only assert that it's something people do, and that a machine made a logical jump from X to X to Y.
Right.
It's not. So I really don't understand. I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of HarperCollins to see what it is, even if I'm, they're leftists, which obviously they are, SJW, editors, but I can't see what they're seeing. I'm a little baffled by their reaction to it. Or how you must have been shocked.
Was Daddy Warpig going to jump in there?
Yeah, I was going to say this, and this is the thought that occurred to me earlier to explain it. You're a young person, you're a young feminist, because that's who this editor was, a young feminist who got assigned to edit this book. I'm telling part of Nick's story because I have heard it before. So if I tell part of it wrong, please, feel free to correct me or just smack me down or whatever. You're a young feminist, you're at a big organization, and what is the number one goal in the lives of SJWs? The number one goal, that is a rhetorical question, apologies. The number one goal in the lives of SJWs is to gain social status for themselves by being offended by something. If they can grab, it's like a trophy, man. You grab a trophy from this vast field of nothingness and say, this right here, this offends me. And all of a sudden, you're a good person. And all of a sudden, all the scum around you say, oh, you're such a wonderful person. You're such a glorious person. You're such a sensitive, morally advanced person. We love you so much. So they are addicted to self-righteousness. They're addicted to being offended, and they're constantly on the lookout to be offended by something. And if at all you make one of their sacred cows look bad for any reason, even if it's the most sane reason in the world, then you have done something horrendous. And that's something in common with all fanatics, not just SJWs. Any fanatic would do that. If you could set it up, suppose you had someone who is an adherent of a good, decent, noble religion, who happened themselves to be a fanatic, and for whatever reason you set it up that an alien race came and invaded Earth, and Catholics would choose to support them because of some reason, whatever it may be. Well, normal Catholics might read that and think, okay, well, that makes sense. I don't have a problem with that. But a fanatical Catholic would be really, really offended.
Right.
And this just happens to be a case where everybody who's an SJW is a fanatic. Everybody is an SJW is easily offended. And because he made one of their holy sacraments seem like in this one specific incident for completely logical and reasonable criteria, it would be bad to shine a good light on abortion. Well, that's offensive because he made something that they think is good and noble and decent look bad.
Now,
I think you just nailed that better than I did.
yeah, War Pig's great for that. We live for the Daddy War Pig rants on this show. Now, Nick, I got to ask you: have you gotten a lot of flack from HarperCollins for going public with this story?
That I have a intellectual property lawyer in my back pocket, and I armed myself with my agent and prepped him, and we're literally now for 3 months we've just been looking over the Maginot Line waiting for the Hun, and I'm feeling very World Money and Tui lately, because I've been listening to Hardcore History's podcast about World War Blueprint for Armageddon, which is great, but nothing, no one. And I've even known and been told by people who've written to them and asked for a response, is this true? And I've even had some media people vetting the whole story, and it just seems to go into a black hole at HarperCollins. It's crazy. The editor in question disappeared 2 weeks after she sort of kiboshed my career, or thought she did, and went to another publishing house. So I don't know what the deal is there or what that's all about, but I think my personal feeling is, at the moment that this was happening, was the tweet your abortion hashtag that was going on, and I think she wanted to play the home game with her career.
Right.
And
Right.
I think that she made a decision, and I don't think that HarperCollins wanted to make that decision. The imprint that I was with, which was Harper Voyager, because I was doing well and I was critically acclaimed and I was commercially successful. But I think in this day and age, in this sort of climate culture of fear,
Right.
I think these jihadis, these SJW jihadis, are literally holding corporations hostage and saying, if you don't do what I want to do with your policy and with your corporate assets, and HarperCollins paid me a lot of money, but she basically just sacrificed it for an ideal. But I think that they're more afraid, like so many liberals that we know of being slurred with that, you're a misogynist or whatever.
Right.
I think she held them hostage personally, and I think they're ashamed and embarrassed, but there's no corporation alive that's going to come and apologize.
Well, you know what? If you were a liberal, you would chase her because she doesn't agree with you politically. You would chase her to the next publishing house, hound them, continue your smear campaign in public, basically have a tantrum, and never be happy until she was broke, homeless, and living under a bridge.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah,
That's the difference between the right and the left. You went on about your business, and
you just move on and you do the next thing, and that's the way that it is. But it's
I'm astounded they haven't responded. To be quite honest, I mean that's the kind of thing that when you throw allegations of censorship at a publisher, that's very serious business. And I mean, maybe I'm sensitive to it because I'm in public relations, and maybe
right.
But I can't see them not responding to that. I mean, if I was working there, I would have crafted a response to that immediately.
The problem was, I think, for them is that the paper trail and the outside third party is so clear, and that they literally told the chain of events is, I write this book and I deliver it on time. I think it was July 15th. I had to meet them at Comic-Con down in San Diego. I did Comic-Con. Everything was great with my senior editor. We had a great time. Looking forward to reading the book. I wait 2 months and I'm still not getting notes. And you usually get notes back pretty quickly about what you want to change. And in those notes would have been an excellent opportunity to say, we know you like to write these things. This issue is very controversial. Could we walk it back? Could we do these things? And I could have bargained with them and said, well, I think if I could have laid out to them that argument of I didn't want to be Mr. Smith, I think they could have actually bought that and done that if it would have been a normal process where you're given notes, and there's a paper trail there and everything like
right.
that says you did wrong here or whatever. But the way that it came down was so unusual and so weird. But the mistake was they went through a third party, which is my agent, who's a legal representative at an entity. And he called me up and he said, I have some bad news. And I was waiting for it to be about something else in that book. And
right.
Danny Warpig, who I know has read the book, he could tell me what I think it was going to be about. It would probably be more about an intellectual property issue in that book. But I actually found out later, no, I was clear. But I was waiting for it because I wrote extensively about a Star Trek-like universe. And I was waiting for them to say, you're too close. You can't get this close to it. And I would have had to say, well, okay, I'll change everything around, or I could have made an argument that it's fair usage and those kinds of things, just like Ernie Klein did in his books. It would have been feasible. But that was the issue that I was waiting for. But he goes, they're deeply offended. And at that moment, I said, this is not about, intellectual property. I said, deeply offended about what? And he said, they're deeply offended about the first chapter. I said, what about the first chapter? And he said, the abortion. So, there's no way that you can, and that's a conversation that my wife had knowledge to, my agent had knowledge to, and my agent is a person who will tell you. And he told me during that conversation, he goes, I agree with them. It is offensive. I'm from New York. I am a left-leaning liberal, and this is offensive. But he goes, it's wrong for them to come in and tell you this, that to deliver a threat of either change it or we're not going to publish you. People, and that was a lot of the attacks that came at me on my website. The SJWs suddenly become masters of the dictionary, and they're going to tell you exactly what banned means and what censorship means. And yes, there are U.S. codes and laws on the definition of censorship and banned, but there are also there's the concept, and the concept supersedes the actual definition. If someone goes and denies you entrance into something, and they do it for, like if you're a black person and they deny you entrance to a tennis club, they can use all well, we're not banning you, you just don't meet the salary requirements or whatever. But you can show, like, no, it's about this, and you have these other people in here, and blah, blah, blah. Censorship doesn't necessarily have to fit the legal definition to still be censorship. And my friend Michael Bunker, actually, who's a historian and a scholar on Russian culture and the pogroms and he wrote an excellent defense of censorship and the way that I'd applied it. And we published that article the day after, and I think that article got about 4,000 hits. But they'll still come at you and say, oh, no, you used this wrong. They just chose not to publish you because of an economic concern. It's like, no. There was no economic concern. You chose not to publish me because the issue offended you. And that's not something you should do, because when you look at the other things that they publish, publishing as a whole, where you have people like Chuck Wendig or John Scalzi just going far left on social issues and never being called to task on it by anybody in publishing.
Or something like The Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah, exactly. And no, it's not right. It is censorship when you're censoring a certain group of people because you don't ideologically agree with you. There's no place for that in the United States of America.
Yeah, see, now my understanding of an editor at a publishing house was that they were basically supposed to be Vulcan. In other words, look at the work without emotion and evaluate it for its quality and for its saleability, but not something like I'm deeply offended personally doesn't really have any place in evaluating your work. So I don't even know how an editor like that could possibly functionally work.
It was a mystery to me, some of the things that she did, and then coming back, the second conversation was where I got from my agent was where I got what they were actually worried about was that you'd lose 50% of your audience.
And would they just pull that out of their asses?
Yeah, I documented that, and I said, no, it was never about that. And you're absolutely right. And an editor is supposed to come in and really what the editor is really looking for, saleability is maybe super tertiary, down the rung after they've accepted the pitch. They're going to sell this novel, and you look at some of the novels and read some of the novels that are written. Saleability isn't a big thing, but what the editor should really be looking for, in my experience in the 4 previous novels that I'd written with them, was that the editor was coming in to say, are you as a writer talking out of your butt, or is this supported? Does this make sense? And that's what that overall assistant editor is doing. When you get the next edit you get is from a line editor, and they're coming through and fact checking everything and crossing everything out and making it tight. But that initial editor is a story structure editor. That's all they are. And she could have attacked that abortion issue intelligently, and she could have said, I don't buy this as a reason for the AIs to destroy. See, that would have been the smart thing. And that's how, just like Daddy Warpig was saying in his rant, that's how she gave herself away. See, a smart, true, assassin of something, they don't need to leave their fingerprints all over what they've done. They just need to shut it down.
Right.
But see, as Daddy Warpig was saying in his rant, which was absolutely perceptive, she wanted to make sure that virtue was assigned. So it had to be done for the right reason. And the reason was this straight white male has no business writing about female issues.
Well, unfortunately, what she may have learned as she moves forward in her career is to be a little more devious in her efforts to try and censor guys like you and maybe not be as honest about it. So she may very well go on in the publishing world and find those good reasons to reject works like yours. That's unfortunately, I think that's the lesson people like her always learn. They don't learn not to do it or that they're wrong. They learn to find a way to do it under the radar.
I think, eventually, but I think power corrupts, and I definitely think the power structure right now trends left. And when you have that power, and I've been a conservative my whole life, and more so in the past 8 years. I probably would before the past 8 years.
That's amazing that you've survived in Hollywood for
but you keep your mouth shut, and I'm more of a compassionate conservative. I'm a social, absolutely, right-leaning social conservative, but sometimes I trend into different ways. But the past 8 years has been filled with the runaway excess of the left, and what you find about them is that there is a hubris, there is a braggadocio, there is a sort of all those things that kill Greek heroes. is what's happening to them, in that they don't know any restraint, and so they just go in and they sneer at you while they do it. And so it's the success is actually causing them to make critical errors like this. Whereas, like I said, and like you said, it would have been very easy to shut down unofficially, and very, corporations are masters of shutting down things for other reasons. But it was such a weird, bold move, and in reality, it was a gift from God, because she played all her cards badly in front of a multitude of people.
Now, Nick, I want you to know that tomorrow at about, I would say, noon, I'm going to get a text from my wife, and she's going to say, "You had an eloquent published wordsmith on your show, and you said pulled numbers out of their asses." That's what's going to happen tomorrow when she hears that.
Well, I think I'd actually planted that in your head, because I'd used pulled out of their butts earlier in the conversation. So you can blame me. You can blame me.
All right, I'll blame you. Now, did you, along that line of you saying that it's okay for the left in Hollywood to plant these kinds of over-the-top left political-leaning ideas in their shows and movies, and that's always okay, I wanted to know if you had seen, there was a news story this morning that the writers for the show Quantico were coming under some fire because they did an episode apparently last week about a band of domestic terrorists, and they had the domestic terrorists as they were rampaging. I didn't see the show. I'm not sure what heinous crimes they were committing, but they were screaming "Make America Great Again" as they did it.
Yeah, everybody has to go back and watch the movie The Player, and the scene where the development executive says, "We don't need writers," and throws a newspaper out on the table with, "These are our stories." And I don't think that's wide. I mean, but it's just so weird. I think, what was it, Homeland? They had a whole season where they're pursuing this terrorist and this jihadi and everything like that. And it turns out in the end to be a right-wing Zionist,
Of course.
And I can't tell you the amount of shows that I've watched where it's a crazy. It's never who it is in the news. It's who it is in the news, but we needed to change a few facts to slam Christians, to slam Jews, to slam the conservatives, and that stuff never happens. 99% of terrorism in the past 100 years has absolutely been the responsible with a certain group of people, but you won't see that narrative on TV. You will see, it's a crazy right-wing zealot. So it's weird, but the creep of it into every show is incredible, and the amount of sort of shoehorning and bending they do. But then it was funny, when I wrote Control Alt Revolt, I would have people who didn't so much read it as scan for offense in it, and then they would try to write reviews, and they would say, this person sets up straw men and just knocks them down. And I really wasn't trying to do that. I was trying to tell the story, but I was thinking, like, most everything that I watch I remember, I watched The Walking Dead this season, and they had the priest that no one likes on there.
Mm-hmm.
And who's just a terrible person with theology, and a gutless coward, and just a miserable person. But he really comes into this nobility when he counsels the gay character, and he doesn't go in on the fact that maybe you're not making some good life choices here, or, maybe the statistics of homosexuality, if you really add them up with the incidence of domestic violence and drug and alcohol addiction and depression and suicide, maybe those are reasons why you're not happy. He just wades in and says, "Do you love her?" Like no priest, legitimate priest ever. And it was, I literally had to go to the French and just go incroyable and pick my mouth up off the floor. So
it's not surprising. I saw the trailer for that new show that was coming out, The Real McNeil's, and it's Irish Catholic family, and of course the opening episode, the son tells them that he's gay, and you can't help but think, I just envision a room full of Hollywood writers with their middle fingers up, looking at it. I'm looking at you, Irish Catholics. Screw you. We're gonna really give it to you in this show. And I just wonder. It's amazing to me that these shows get off the ground, find an audience. I mean, that one's not really finding an audience. It's not doing all that well. But I don't even know how the audacity of it. Even someone like me who's been a conservative for all my entire life, it still can take me by surprise. Does it ever shock you when you see something like that?
It's funny. In Hollywood, we see the billboards in advance as it tries to ramp up into being something. And I kept seeing, and I'm Irish and Cherokee Indian, Black Irish, and I kept seeing the billboards. I'm like, oh, hey, Irish show, like all Irish. I'm in. And my wife said, hey, notice the rainbow halo on the kid?
Right.
I said, I'm out. But that's the thing about the left and about this girl and about the ONeills is that there's no burden to tell a truthful story or to try to please most of middle America that they refer to as, in sneering and derogatory terms as flyover country and everything like that. Anything they can to demean people and change their cultural values. But every show, like if you really think about it, in the past 5 years, every season there have been 1 to 2, or if not a slew, of really super pro gay shows, and none of them make it.
No.
And the left are like kamikaze pilots. Just despite anything, they're gonna get it onto the deck of the carrier and blow it up. And every time it just gets shot down by ACAC. And they're like, nope, this season we're going in. And I think like a few seasons ago, it was 2 gay guys, and they were, and then it was 2 gay guys adopting a boy, or a girl.
Mm-hmm.
And this season they're like, well, how about mostly straight people, but 1 gay kid? And, next season it's going to be a gay dog.
Yeah, oh yeah. They that's how far they go. I mean, it's incredible. But I think Modern Family maybe is the exception. It's been somewhat successful. But then Media Matters comes out with a study and it says they determined that gays are the most underrepresented minority group on television. Did you see the study?
Yeah, I did see that. But here's the weird thing. I know gay because my wife is an opera singer, and so we're often, doing things with the gay community. Not, we're not marching in gay pride parades. We're just doing our work side by side with them, and they'll tell me a lot of the times. They'll say, a lot of the times they hate the characters that are portrayed on there because they're so cliche, and they're not like that. So it's weird. It's Hollywood is always trying to show you this ideal of what it thinks life should be. And unfortunately now it's in the hands of a group of people who just aren't satisfied with the gay numbers. But, the next step is this trans LGBT bathroom thing. And when you look at the numbers on that, it's 0.03% of the population.
Mm-hmm.
Yet we're all having to tell our daughters, 100% of the population, that you're going to need to feel massively uncomfortable when you use the restroom now.
Well, I find it odd because with the bathroom thing, no matter what side of it you're on, the mantra that I've been hearing from the left for 20 years was, if only one person is offended, then something has to change. That's why they cancel these events at colleges. They can't have they can't have a sombrero festival. They couldn't do that because just one person was offended. But here you have 1.1 million signatures on a petition, and it's too bad.
My answer to this a little while back ago in a tweet was just basically, I think the SJWs should have their way, and I think that they should have. It's such a great thing, all the things that they're talking about, the gay stuff and the gay dinosaur stuff and all that stuff. It's so great that there really should be a genre just specifically called SJW fiction, and it should just be left alone to do its thing. And the hilarity of that is, as we all know, SJWs are absolutely incapable of anything hilarious or wit or just having fun, because everything has to be overpowered and mortified by this sense of self-righteous gravitas that's really actually boorish and obnoxious. And the end result is the reason that the SJWs had to take over science fiction, which I will tell people was a classically weak medium and ripe for takeover, is because no one would actually read SJW fiction because it's so boring. And if you look at the major SJW authors, they're absolutely the most boring. But if you look at a lot of the times the more right-leaning conservative or even moderate writers, or people who are just like, I don't care about anything, I'm just telling you about lightsabers and aliens, they have a tendency, I think, to do much better. But when someone is as hard as left as some of the big ones, let's just take Chuck Wendig. they can absolutely tank a brand book, So the
Right.
money, I think the majority of profit, it actually trends right. But because it's controlled by left-leaning people, they're like, well, we don't care. See the kamikaze analogy.
I want
Well,
to
yeah, go ahead, Danny.
I want to complain because I don't know if you've ever read. I think it's the Jennifer Morg books.
Yeah, I've seen them.
So last novel, the main big bad guy was an evangelical church in America, and the evangelical church in America was a front for the cult of Cthulhu, and then he went off on all this dominionist stuff and things like that. Frankly, if you're genuinely worried about Christian dominionists, you're a paranoid conspiracy theorist, and you have no clue what the real world is like because you've never met anybody in America who's actually evangelical.
Yeah.
You're talking about how the bad guys are always Christians or they're always conservatives or always whatever. That was just the most obnoxious and offensive plot point. Was he seriously thinks, really honestly, the author thinks that evangelical Christians are a real threat to freedom in America. He's British, by the way. He's not American, but he thinks that evangelical Christians are really plotting to overthrow the government and institute a cult where they run the world and oppress women. And so he made that the main bad guy of his book, and it was just so much bullshit.
I love the English, but they're always to be taken with a grain of salt. And I think it's hilarious that a guy writes about evangelical Christians taking over America when the name Mohammed is the most named baby boy name in England, and they have a church closing every day and a mosque opening. So it's sort of the Stockholm mentality over there. And the English writing about America, reviewing America, it's like Piers Morgan. They get it wrong on so many levels. But that everybody's entitled to weigh in on their opinion. But I think the left, honestly and sincerely, is out of valid ideas, and you can see it in almost every plot point. A lot of the times, in a lot of even huge mainstream writers, it's always an evil businessman or corporation, or an evil church, an evil Christian. It's never an evil government. It's
right.
never. It's the go-tos are so hacky, and I just think the problem always with the left, it's an echo chamber. And what we see, with the whole Gamergate thing, and what we see on Twitter, when people validly try to engage them in ideas, the first go-to move that the left has is block them. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear anything that challenges them. They want to go back to the stuff, and that's why you get a book winning a major award that's about an astronaut being raped by a dinosaur. They're absolutely out of, they're absolutely out of ideas, and that someone is making fun of it is hilarious because it's true.
I like what you said about how they use Hollywood, and in fact, a lot of people don't know this, but the government does have a fund where they can sort of like product placement, where the Obama administration, for example, years ago, tried to put pressure on a lot of Hollywood writers, whether it be asking them for favors or sometimes it can be through actual payments, and they are, there's nothing illegal about it, but they wanted them to work in plot lines about Obamacare or nationalized health care. And it's not as uncommon as you think. I've actually researched it, and I don't want to say it's just the left that has done it, but it's the left that has done it far more successfully. And the reason they do it...
I actually didn't know that, but it makes absolute sense.
Well, I think the reason they do it is because of what you said. If they can get enough things on television that parrot their talking points, they can sort of create the impression that their numbers are larger than they are. Which I always say, I said to my wife the other day, I said, if an alien race ever was to come to this planet and try to learn about us through watching television, they'd say to themselves, how could they survive? They're like 40% gay. They can't have...
They would nuke us, like a Control Revolt. That's what they would do. They would look at us and they would just, and it's weird. In a certain way, television is the culture, but only because there is this vast swath of people who, you know, okay, here's an example. You're probably about the same age as I am. And when we were kids, your dad was like the law. You know, your dad was like, you know, John Wayne, but kind of angrier. And when your dad like went to work, you know, and your mom would say, your dad's coming home, you know, everybody be quiet. There was this massive sense of respect for your dad because your dad was out there busting his butt and providing and everything. Like, you know what I'm saying? We had that mythic respect for our dads. And I hope we all did. But now when you watch television, most white males or dads or whatever are treated like Everybody Loves Raymond. Kind of stupid, kind of hapless. You know, not that dad, you know, but just like you know, and what you see now is the rise of this sort of super iron-jawed, militant, completely irrational feminism, and you see men just really being denigrated for no reason in that men, and it started off like maybe about 10 to 15 years ago, but the creep in it has been so prevalent now that you know, when I'm at Whole Foods and I see some couple, I see this guy who just has no manliness whatsoever. I mean, he's growing the beard so that he can maybe feel like a lumberjack, sort of, but he's wearing yoga pants. And his wife is just lecturing about how they're going to drive this electric car and they're going to recycle and all this kind of stuff. And that sort of mythic dad that we used to have, and we're kind of afraid of, you know, but those were all for all the value. He's gone, and now we have kind of stupid, hapless dad, and even what's coming next, really just sort of like accessory dad, you know, to the you know, the woman's whole, you know, I'm going to have 5 kids, and I'm going to have a job, and I'm going to do it all, and I'm going to do yoga, and you're an accessory. So the narrative has changed, and I think television had a pretty big hand in emasculating masculinity.
Yes, and before Warpig, I want to let you talk. I just want to work this in by way of sourcing what I just said previously, because Nick had never heard of it, and he's in Hollywood. But this was I had to dig to find the article. It was the Washington Times, and this is just one example that I found when I researched this before. The California Endowment is a foundation that spends millions to promote signature laws. And the government recently provided a $500,000 grant to ensure TV writers and producers have information and work the Affordable Care Act into can be carefully stitched into plot lines. So
careful. We're a little loose on the carefully stitched.
Yeah, well, I know how it goes on this show. I throw something like that on there, and I'll get these direct messages from people telling me that I'm full of crap and it didn't happen. So that's the source. That's one of the sources. You guys can all Google it, but there's plenty of examples out there.
The gay stuff, in that, like, because it seems like every show has to really go out of its way to show you a gay character, and so much so, like, just to bend in on that real quick, Downton Abbey is this show that, you know, because I'm slightly an Anglophile, that I enjoy. And there's been a gay character in there, and he's been a miserable human being. He's not missed an opportunity to screw everybody and cheat and lie and steal. But this final season, as they were trying to put this sort of nobility button on it, and I'm halfway through the season, maybe it changes, but they really went out of their way to show, over the past season and a half, like, how tortured this guy's life is because he's gay, and no one understands him. And so much so that, like, literally the last episode I watched, he's sitting in the dark crying because he's so lonely about being gay, because white male society is so oppressive. and it's like, but wait, didn't we all hate this cat? Like, and not just because he was gay, but because, like, he stole, and he caused someone to, you know, have this terrible thing happen to them, and he lied, and he backstabbed, and he informed, and had these people thrown in prison, and, like, just a slew of criminal and, you know, social misdeeds. And now I'm supposed to kind of feel sorry for him because he's a lonely gay guy? No, he's lonely because he's an asshole.
Right. Well, you know, it's funny.
I've got an alternate point of view on that, because I've actually seen the whole show.
Okay.
So I've seen
it changes around, right?
I've seen everything up to the end. Let me say this.
Oh, don't spoil it for me, Daddy Warpig. I don't know.
It's not just that the character is miserable because he's lonely. He's miserable because he hates himself. He's a self-loathing individual. And I want to take this away from gay or not gay for a second, because I think that's a distraction, because this is a fundamental point of human nature that can apply to anyone. People who genuinely hate themselves or loathe themselves, whether it's for a good reason or not, frequently do very bad things because they think it doesn't matter anymore. They have just accepted that they're a bad person inside, and so their conscience gets burnt out, because if you're a bad person, it doesn't matter anymore whether you're good or bad. And one of the things I think that his journey is over this last season is, whatever made him miserable or not, he starts not hating himself. And because he doesn't hate himself, he can begin to behave like a more decent human being, and people around him can react to him trying to be a better person. Now, if you took this away from, being gay and had someone who was an opium addict, which would be, in the time period, would be timely, or an alcoholic, or whatever, you could see where that would be completely sensible, that you're an alcoholic and you're a miserable bastard because of it, and you hate yourself, and so you do a whole lot of things because you don't really care. But as you come to stop hating yourself and come to start dealing with your alcoholism and come to start treating people around you better, people start to accept you more. And I think that's the character arc. Once you see the whole season, I think you'll see that that's a... And so the character arc, even if it's got the homosexuality involved, is true to humanity. It rang true for me.
Yeah. Oh, I think it rings true. And I as an actor, I appreciate the acting. I was more saying the layered, textured message is he's lonely and isolated because he's gay, and then all those things that you said, he's given up and become more miserable and everything like that. But the source of it was he is separate from society because he's gay, and now you're going to see and it plays into the narrative of now, because when it's interesting, when any of the sort of most liked characters on the show acknowledge his gayness, they give, and I think Lady Mary gives this look at one point where it's just sort of dismissive, like, that's okay, and it's totally not in keeping with the time or the period or how people would have reacted. So it definitely, for me, it came off as a morality tale for a gay person, or a morality tale for all of us. It rejected the truth of the period in favor of telling me a sermon. That's what I think.
I think the character is lonely because he's a miserable bastard who does nasty things and nobody likes him. Yeah. And I think some of the other characters say things like that at one point during the season.
Yeah.
That he was miserable?
Well, no, that he treats them like crap, and so that's why they don't want him around.
He's a horrible person, but a lot of the times the subtext is, if he just, if we were just more accepting of gays, he wouldn't be this way. And I mean, that's just what I pick up, but maybe I'm too keyed up for that. But the thing of it is you just see so much of this in sort of SJW fiction and TV. You just see this constant morality tale preaching.
Where the real evil in the world is that there are so many judgmental people out there, and the only thing that makes me miserable is not my actions, it's your judgment on my actions, and if you just weren't so judgmental, then my own actions, whatever they are, wouldn't make me miserable.
Exactly. It's that, and that's a very left-leaning thing, and like, it's never my fault what happens to me. It's always someone else's fault. And I was having dinner with my agent and another writer the other night, and this guy went on about every social construct. And every time I leaned in, and tried to go to the heart of it, it was always, well, they're disenfranchised because of this. Well, this is happening because of someone else's thing. And it's like, with the left, it's always someone else's fault. And especially if you can find a Christian or a white guy to blame it on, you've just, hit the Triple Crown. But
it's a very 60s thing.
Yeah.
that was like the entire ethos of the hippies. It's your hang-ups, man. It's your hang-ups, man, that this society, man, is so like, it's just so judgmental, man. If we could just all get past these hang-ups, then like everything would be great, man, and we wouldn't have to. We could just love and live, and we could banish war and hunger and poverty, man.
No, you're a miserable human being because you do jacked up stuff, because you hoarded that food, because you did that thing. You're a miserable human being. No, black people having a problem in the inner city is not because Whitey kept them down or because they haven't had every opportunity in the world. You're miserable because of the choices that you make on a daily basis. And if you think that's not true, ask any Vietnamese boat person from 1979 through 1983 who came here with nothing. They've done great. They've integrated. Their kids are now becoming doctors, all those kinds of things. You look at another group, any other group, but we have this, with the Black Lives Matters thing, we have these people marching in and saying, all my problems, everything that's wrong with me is your fault. And it's like, no. And the only reason this is an issue that I can weigh in on, and I'm sure people will call me a racist, but, that's been basically the better part of this year, getting called a racist and a misogynist and a homophobe. The reason I can say all that is I'm an alcoholic. And I could not blame anybody else for the drinking that almost ruined my life. What made me, quote unquote, stop being an alcoholic or stop drinking was the moment that I said, I'm drinking because I'm choosing to drink. I'm ruining my life by the things that I do. No one's putting a bottle in my hand. No one's ruining my life. And so what I tell everybody is the situation that you're in, whether there are external circumstances or whatever, you're remaining in it because of the things you choose to do. And that's what I would say. So if you think that we could go cover as many topics from Downton Abbey to Black Lives Matter, we've just done that.
It's funny, Nick, whenever I start talking about TV and Hollywood and the way that they try to normalize behaviors or try to make them seem like they're more prevalent in society than they are, and maybe this is because, again, I'm the same age as you, but I always go back to when I was a kid and Murphy Brown became a talking point. And do you remember everyone, there was a couple of, it wasn't even that many, but there was a couple of conservatives that were saying, well, okay, but if this is the path that Hollywood goes down and we normalize this kind of thing before you know it, if we accept it as normal in a society, then we're going to have more broken families and more single people trying to raise kids and more, and the SJWs of the time, way before there was a label, were all, oh, you uptight conservative jerks, that'll never happen. And you look where we are now, and I start to wonder, I mean, even at the time I thought the conservatives were being a little silly, but I look back at it now and I start to think maybe they had a point.
Well, even the Atlantic magazine published an article that said Dan Quayle was right.
Yeah, exactly. And I was just listening to something that was talking about who is that is it Marino Dowd who writes for the Times or whatever? But someone was talking about an article she wrote in the 80s about going to a graduation in 71 and seeing a pregnant girl walk onto the stage and how shocking that was. And yes, she needed to be encouraged and helped, but at the same time there needed to be some sort of show of disapproval. Well, what do we have now? We don't even have girls, walking and pregnant or anything. They're just getting pregnant and dropping out of school. And that's the thing I was trying to tell the writer the other day, who was saying everything is somebody else's fault. I said, you can't open cans of worms, you can't open doors, like the whole LGBT bathroom thing, and not think that there's going to be some footprint. I said, what do you think is going to happen? Either it's going to be the greatest thing that ever happened to our society, and it's going to revolutionize our society and make it better, or it's going to be the worst thing that happened to us. Which one is it? And he goes, I don't think anything will happen. I think it'll be a wash. And I went in and leaned in on it, but there's nothing that's a wash. Everything that you do from Murphy Brown on, all those things have consequences, but the left is always trying to tell you you're a bigot for saying it's possible that the great society that Johnson inaugurated might lead to a 70% single child family or single parent family in the black community when they started out with a 15% ratio. So the things that you do, they lead places. There's, as Jim Morrison said, no one gets out of here alive. There's going to be damage.
Right. That's one of the reasons I always liked Ben Carson, was because he wasn't afraid to say, hey, some of these wounds in the black community are self-inflicted, and they can be fixed, but first we have to at least acknowledge there's a problem. And if I was sitting in a room full of Black Lives Matter people, and I brought that up and said, what is the 70% or I think it might even be 80% illegitimacy rate do to you as a culture, they would just start shouting racist. Until you acknowledge that problem, that it is a problem, and I guess that's up for debate now, even today. I guess that's even up for debate. Is it a problem that there's only single mothers and the fathers aren't in the picture? I think clearly it is a problem. And there's a number of studies, there's enough data to say that it is a problem. But we have to ignore all of that and just pretend that it isn't causing an issue in the community. And if you point out that maybe it is, then you're some sort of a racist.
That's a crime, though, and I totally understand, and we've all been in that situation where you're like, oh, I want to say something, but I'm not saying it. But like, imagine if a doctor, an oncologist said, well, I don't want to tell Dan he has cancer because he'll get mad at me. So I'm just going to tell Dan
Right.
everything's great. And it's like, no, you've got a cancer. You've got legitimately jacked up stuff. And I'm willing to go in and help you with it. That's always what has to come with that next message is you've got some problems and I'm willing to help you with it. But, yeah, it's one thing for us three to sit here and say that, but who's going to go out and do it? But I always go back to the Bible and to Ezekiel, and it's a different situation, a different context, but I think it still stands up the same when God tells Ezekiel, you go and tell him what I said. And he says, hey, they're gonna get mad at me. He says, if you don't go and tell them, then I'm gonna put it on you. Meaning basically, if you're given a message or you see something that's wrong with society and you don't stand up and tell someone to help them turn from the thing that's going to destroy them, then you're just as much to blame.
See, I find this interesting that we're having this conversation. And I'll tell you a little bit about a debate I had yesterday with a rather liberal friend of mine. His point of view was about how hard and difficult it is for not just African Americans, but I would say there are other people that live in places that are labeled the ghetto, and I guess the word ghetto is supposed to be racist now, but it all started with an interview from a football player who was talking about how difficult it is to come from the ghetto and then get all this money and then not blow it because they just aren't used to success or having money. And anyway, my point was that, well, why does it even have to be a ghetto? I mean, when you see ghettos portrayed on television or even in documentaries, and Dinesh D'Souza toured a few of them in one of his last documentaries, you see garbage on the ground and broken glass, and you see just general disarray, things that are run down or unpainted. And I always think to myself, would it still be a ghetto if they picked up the garbage and painted the house and fixed the window? Or they act like the ghetto is some living, breathing thing that evolved and turned itself into a ghetto. And I think, no, the people in the ghetto turned it into a ghetto. It could be cleaned up, right? I mean,
oh man, you got ghetto, like it's a disease.
Yeah, you got the ghetto on.
You got ghetto, man. You got to get that cleaned up. No, you're out. I mean, my wife did some operas that were in the inner city in South Central LA, and it was like Mogadishu. It was like a war zone there, and it's a dirty little secret. But there was a part of me that said, instead of doing that thing to the guy I'm passing on the street, instead of doing that thing that you're doing, why don't you get out a dustpan? Why don't you start doing stuff? And I know that comes off as like, out of reality, but I do that in my neighborhood. People litter in my neighborhood. I go out and pick it up because I don't want to look at it. And I've done it, and I've seen people come up and see me doing it and say, yeah, I should do that too. But
because you know what though, Nick? Because here's the thing: if you say that the ghettos should be improved or the area should be improved, they'll say, well, they're poor, they don't have the money for that. And then I always try to counter with, it doesn't cost any money to sweep the sidewalk or pick the garbage up.
Yeah.
Or to remove the rotting car out of your yard. That doesn't cost any money, and I don't understand why.
All these things are symptom. The problem is, we'll just say Al Sharpton, but it's people like him that profit and live very well, reinforcing to minority cultures, you've been kept down. And so it's a grievance culture, and it's pervasive throughout.
It's an industry. That's how we make a living.
And that industry, the factory is that quote unquote ghetto, and it has to look bad and everything like that. But the thing, like I would say to everybody, you're where you're at, because of the choices you're making on a daily basis. No, maybe you're not there. Maybe you're not there because it began there, but every day you've got the opportunity to do something, even if it's America, even if it's become this weird sort of socialist country that we're starting to flirt with. If some guy on a raft from Vietnam after 90 years of war can show up and buy a donut store within 5 years, you can get your act together.
Riggs, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
Now, this might be the most interesting show we've had. I think you should be a regular. We've had so many topics. Yeah. I was going to, it's funny because before you got off on that last story, I was going to say I'm on the board of the local Irish festival, and so you should come down in September, do a book signing, and now I'm not sure how much fun that festival is without the Guinness, so I've never done it. So.
No, see, as my agent said, he goes, "You're the funnest person to drink with that doesn't drink." I have a pinch drinker. I bring my wife, who's a Portuguese, and she drinks for me. So,
oh, perfect. All right, bring her down then.
And she's very pretty and easy on the eyes. So
bring her to Irish Fest, and we'll get her. We'll put some Guinness in there.
It's more fun. I would love to come on as many times as possible. I love to say, the truth, and because there's just so little of it. I mean, it's the truth and it's inflammatory, but when you one day when you kind of steer into it and you own it, it's a lot more fun than the nervousness that everybody has now. Even writers of like, oh, I don't want to offend this person. Oh, I can't write this. Or comedians summed it up. They won't go to community colleges anymore because it's no fun.
Yeah, Seinfeld, and I mean, when Chris Rock says colleges are too PC, I mean, it's incredible to me that they don't see, how bad this. It's funny. Every now and then, a person I went to college with will stumble upon the show somehow, and usually it's because they've joined Twitter and I don't know it, and they see me, tweet the link for the show, and then I'll get a text message. Oh, I didn't know you did a little thing on the internet, and then they'll listen to a few, and then I'll start getting the text. I can't believe you said.
You say, well, there it is. I'm a horrible person.
This week, what I'm about to give them a heart attack. I think most of them.
Yeah, well, it's okay. I mean, the one thing I would say to everybody is, you can be angry and upset. Just keep talking, and maybe your point is so great, I'll change my opinion. But if you don't think I don't sit around and think about these things and observe them, that's kind of what I'm paid to do as a writer. And the point that I made about Control Alt Revolt, when they said, someone asked me some question, I said I held a mirror up to them and they didn't like what they saw. That's why they freaked out.
What are the odds that you're ever going to try to adapt one of those novels for either the small screen, or is there any? Have you talked about it with anyone?
It's funny. Yeah, it's funny that you said that. That actually happened. There was always, like, when I would go to San Diego Comic-Con, my agent would always get like a call the next day, and then you never hear. But being in Hollywood, I know how flaky stuff is. It never happens. But I've actually got I actually was told to start working on a treatment this week for my first novel, which was The Old Man in the Wasteland, and that's going to go to a pretty legit producer. So you never can tell, and you can be in development hell for years. Everybody thinks now with Andy Weir, who's a great guy, and I did a Comic-Con panel with him, and he's absolutely just the most sincere. He's exactly like you think he is. He's very cool, just sweet, nice guy. His success couldn't have happened to a better guy. But the truth of it is, what happened to him with his novel is such a Cinderella story, and that you have a perfect actor for the part, take it and push it through, and it's a hit. Big director, all that kind of stuff. That generally does not happen. I mean, you could just hang out for years. Right.
So that's the best way to get something made, is have an actor love your work,
right?
Because they see a part for themselves in it and they genuinely like it, and they go and start rattling cages until it gets made.
Yeah, exactly. And the actor has to have the moment in time. There have been periods actually in Matt Damon's career where that might not happen, but it was that right moment that happens. And Hollywood's so weird and everything like that, but and it's sometimes it's weird, like post-apocalyptic stuff. They'll say, oh, we're not doing post-apocalyptic anymore, or my Soda Pop Soldier novel is a lot like Ready Player One, and Spielberg's doing that, and I'm like, wouldn't another competing studio want to put something out? So you never can tell. But
Ernie Klein's a big liberal, though, right? Isn't that probably play a role?
Definitely. I mean, a friend of mine, Hank Garner, just interviewed him on the Authors Podcast, and that's a good podcast to listen to. to hear writers talking about writing. And I, you know, when you read Ready Player One, he'll just suddenly depart from the story and go off on this left-wing tangent. But to hear his story was actually quite interesting, and some things I didn't know. In that, the idea he wrote Fanboys, if you ever saw that movie, and
Yeah, I did.
the journey that took, and the concept of what it came out of was very sweet. And the studio tried to come in and say, you know, this cancer story really sucks. Can't they just want to go on a weekend, you know, road trip? And the studio kind of wanted to turn it into this sort of like, you know, 80s teen sex comedy. And it probably would have done really well if you'd have got Seth Rogen and, you know, that whole crowd in there. But he fought to keep it legit. And then Kevin Spacey came in and had the same vision. And it came in as a much smaller movie and, you know, did whatever. But you know, it was a good commitment. But yeah, does he lean left? Is he doing well? Yeah, you know. But it was amazing about the left when Armada came out that some girl over at Salon just waded in on Armada for all the SJW reasons in the world and actually contributed to that novel's lack of success. Even though it did well and everything like that, it didn't do Ready Player One. And a lot of people come in and touch that up and say, well, you know, it wasn't Ready Player One. But Salon bears a huge amount, and that girl bears a huge amount of responsibility for tanking that book by going after him because he didn't have a strong female character. And, you know, and it's like they missed the Reagan rule. They're starting to shoot inside the tent.
See,
Right.
this is looking at, like, I'm just taking this from a personal point of view.
Uh-huh.
I came out of Gamergate, and the very next thing I did after Gamergate was get involved in Sad Puppies and Rabid Puppies, and entirely out of proportion to anything I personally actually did, I got a lot of, I don't want to call it publicity, but, you know, I got attacked by Patrick Nielsen Hayden in his blog on Making Light. I was...
Yeah.
I was pointed out as the guy who rigged the Hugos. I'm like, wait a minute, dude.
Wrong guy.
I mean, I'm flattered. It's great, but no,
Yeah.
that really wasn't me.
Yeah, I think the SJWs fans to be Dragon Slayer.
Hang on, we get.
I would say.
All right,
it's
put him
good
out.
that I'm gonna use that. You're
Get
gonna
out.
laugh how I'm gonna use that dog.
Start the show, dog. He interrupts every week, at least once a week.
I think that the SJWs need dragons, even if they have to go out and strap, you know, a pair of horns on your dog. That dog.
He's out. He's out now. We're all set.
Yeah.
One of the only Dragon Slayers, and I told him that in the community is really Vox Day. That guy is a, you know, whether you agree with him or not, he is a bold and of course Daddy Warpig and Larry Correa and Brad Torgeson and Sarah Hoyt. But Vox Day is probably the gold standard for Dragon Slayers, and he doesn't need to create them. But the left, as Daddy Warpig was just saying, they'll just turn you into the dragon they need to slay.
See, this is the thing, though. You're talking about Salon, and they're out trashing this poor guy's career.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, you know what? I'm lucky because I don't have any illusions that if I ever got involved in, you know, publishing, that I would ever be treated fairly by any of these people. So I don't have to worry about it, because the only people that would ever network about anything I wrote are Sarah Hoyt and Dave Freer and Larry and Brad and Brian Niemeyer, my podcasting partner who got nominated for Campbell, and you know, you and things like that. I don't have to worry about what Salon does, because Salon isn't taken seriously among the people that I would ever write books for, or I would ever sell books to, or who would ever talk about my books. I'm already persona non grata among everyone in the respectable world, so I don't have to worry about what the respectable world thinks.
I wouldn't call Salon respectable.
You know, when the wrong people hate you, then you're in the right company.
Right, yeah, exactly. You know what, Nick? I need a private broadcast studio. Can you go ahead and put an essay on your website about maybe get me a Kickstarter going? This is brutal. This house is dead silent all day long. The second I start the show, it's a train station in here.
You know what? The people love dogs, and so that works.
Must love dogs.
Yeah.
Oh, I got a guest appearance off screen in the latest Declan Finn novel
That's awesome.
that he's writing.
The War Pig.
It's it's interesting because I think this is the beginning of a movement, and there was a gut check yesterday, of course, and on some of the websites that are a little more underground, there were people sort of having, and there are people that are involved in all this that support and love, both candidates, and so you can, but it was weird. There was this sort of weird gut check moment, and one of the things I just see a lot of the people that are doing things now, a lot of the names that we've mentioned in this, they are probably dirty words in the salon crowd, but 20 years from now, they'll be perceived as sort of and not to give it too much gravitas, but the founding fathers of this movement. But everybody wants to be a founding father, but they don't want to have to do the muddy work to get there. So I think a lot of these people are doing that.
Sorry about that. I just have Wade switch dogs.
Okay.
You had to switch dogs?
Yeah, I had the one that was barking went out, and then the other one decided he had to go out, so I had to go switch him. I have two. You know what, Nick? It's so refreshing for me to talk to a guy in Hollywood that I actually get along with. Before, that's one of the remarkable things about Twitter, I think, is that if you had told me when I was a kid that I would speak to, anyone in Hollywood for any reason, I would have thought you were crazy. But here we are, 20 years later, and I have a Twitter fight with Will Wheaton from Star Trek, and that one went on for like 24 hours, and finally he blocked me, and then I got him so I had him so wound up that he was subtweeting me, and that even after he blocked me, he was still arguing into the air about what I had said to him. And then last week, then I had Nick Searcy go after me last week. So it's always interesting when I interact with anyone in Hollywood.
I think Will is working out his demons, but okay, so here's a fun Star Trek story. When I was first starting out as an actor, I did a cable access soap opera, and the director was Mr. Chekhov.
Really?
Oh, wow.
And it was awesome because not only was I a Star Trek fan, I was such a Star Trek fan that I played Starfleet Battles. Do you remember that game?
I do.
I played it.
Yeah. So for me, it was like, Chekhov! I had to restrain myself with my girlish, and I was sort of the heavy in the soap opera, as in like, I was kind of the bad boy who owned the bar. It was really super cheesy, and I'm glad it's not on YouTube anywhere, I hope. So
now everyone's digging for it right now. Everyone's looking for
Nestor. He played Nestor on Babylon 5.
Yeah, he was so unhappy and so miserable as a human being, and he would tell these stories. Like every actor in Hollywood has this story that I'm telling you right now, like a series of stories. Like I can tell you about the time I met Steven Spielberg, and you have these stories that we all have, and you say that your cocktail stories, or you're like, look at me, I'm a big man, or whatever it is. So he had these stories, but like they involved him not giving autographs to fans. Like I was at dinner one time, and this fan at a convention, and he just didn't realize like that no one liked him, and it was miserable and everything like that. But I was just starting out, I was learning acting, and so one day after shooting, I get in the elevator, and he comes in. I hold the door open for him, and I feel that this is the time in my career where I should tell him what an influence he was on me. And I'm sorry, I'm not a great actor, because I'd screwed up a few times, and I said, but I just really thanked him for the opportunity and being here, and I ended it with, I apologize that my acting skills aren't the greatest, but I'm working on that. And that's the point where the older, sort of Wilford Brimley actor would say, that's okay, kid, hang in there, you're going to make something of it someday. I see you as a young, Vince Vaughn or whatever it was. He just looks at me and goes, uh-huh. And it was the longest 3-story elevator ride I ever had. Like you lay it all out there, and you say, you're looking for that like hang in there, you can do it. And he just gave me nothing and got off. And he was just a deeply unhappy person. And that story a lot of the times is pretty standard in Hollywood. Like, you think that the people who are up there at the top or whatever, like, that they should be happy, that they have all the reasons to be happy and all those kinds of things. But they actually turn out to be very deeply miserable people, very avaricious, very non-self-actualized, and constantly in this state of bitter anxiety about what someone else has.
You know, whenever I hear a story like this, I always go back to one of my favorite movies that literally no one I know has seen the movie, and I don't think it was very popular, but have you ever seen Swimming with Sharks?
Yes.
Don't you love it with Kevin
Yeah.
Spacey?
Yeah, exactly. And that's it's just, you know, it's that, and it's another movie, if you're a really great fun little movie that no one saw, which is called The TV Set with Sigourney Weaver and David Duchovny. Have you ever seen that movie?
No, I never have.
No one's seen it, but it's got the most brilliant line in all of about television making. And David Duchovny is this writer whose brother died, and they've given him a sitcom, and it's kind of a dramedy. And the whole sitcom is about this writer dealing with his brother being dead while teaching high school in the inner city. And so he's really trying to be true and everything like that. And they're doing the tests, and Sigourney Weaver is the highfalutin, you know, studio executive. And they're trying to change the show and make it more funny and more hilarious, and they bring in this deranged character and trying to get more laughs. And so she has this big sort of come to Jesus moment with David Duchovny, and David Duchovny lays it out. He says, listen, this show came out of, I just got out of college, and my brother killed himself, and it was the darkest year of my life. And Sigourney Weaver puts her hands together, and she looks off to the right, and she goes, yes, but what if it wasn't?
Wow.
You know, and that's Hollywood. Like, everything that you set out to do is super noble, and in the end, it's a horrible pile of crap.
I have to look that one up now. Now, you're a Star Trek fan, so let me ask you, and I think Daddy Warpig, I'm assuming he doesn't like them. I don't think he does, but how do you feel about the reboots?
It's bad and getting worse. I was really excited about one. I felt that we were going to do something interesting and new. My feeling about J.J. Abrams, and I hope he, you know, one day I hope to have a movie with him or whatever, and I hope he doesn't go back and do this, but he's a man of excellent concept, in that he comes up with some really awesome concepts and stunningly interesting things, but the execution always falls flat. And if you look at sort of a lot of his movies, you know, you really get excited about it. Like, we're not just gonna reboot Star Trek, we're gonna tell a different Star Trek, and he's responsible for one, and it's excellent. And you go off on a fun little tangent, and you can do anything, because in the first few frames of the movies, you gave yourself the permission to do it. 2 got really strange and weird, with Khan as played by Cumberbatch. And 3 doesn't inspire me, and it feels like we're trying to do a lot of look, Simon Pegg, he's an enthusiast, so he's working on the script, and it's going to be about all these things, but it really seems to be quite strange, and so I'm not excited about it. I love a friend of mine worked with J.J. Abrams on Felicity, and he said, well, what are you working on next? And he says, well, I'm putting together the show that's a cross between Gilligan's Island and The Twilight Zone. Like, and that was Lost. But, like, the way he thinks up concepts and doing things is excellent. But then you remember what the last episode of Lost was like. You remember.
Now, Simon Pegg, does he have science fiction cred? Because I've seen some of the movies that he's made, and none of them seem to be in, you know, anywhere near that genre.
He has geek cred, like, you know.
Into the World and Paul.
Yeah, but also he, you know, like, supposedly he's worked a Star Wars and Star Trek reference into every movie. He's an uber fan. So, and that's weird, because the new television series is supposedly the concept of an uber fan. It's weird, like, Hollywood's kind of out of ideas, and they're tired of losing the fan base, so they're recruiting these uber fans to kind of, like, tell us where to go next. It's sort of like the priests are now going down into the congregation and asking, you know, for the liturgy.
I think my opinions about the Star Trek the new Star Trek movies are pretty close to next. The first one I had a lot of fun with. I thought it was great. But I'm a person who thinks that a lot of the time Star Trek's big weakness is that it was slow-paced and preachy, and so an action movie Star Trek is right up my alley.
Yeah.
I thought the second Star Trek movie was terrible because it was nothing but a retread of Wrath of Khan with a bunch of stuff changed, and all the stuff they changed in bad ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the third one, I'm going to go see because I do a podcast and we talk about stuff like that, so it's kind of my job now to go see stuff. There's a lot of stuff that I have to see just because it's kind of my job to see it now.
What a great job.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a sucker for Star Trek, so I'll see it because I'll see anything Star Trek. And plus, I kind of, I always feel like even if it's a weak entry into the franchise, I feel like my $12 ticket is a vote for more Star Trek. And I want to cast that vote, so I will definitely go see it. Does that make sense?
I definitely think so. I think the problem with our movie culture right now, and it's most emblematic in Star Wars, but Star Trek's the same thing. In a certain way, the Enterprise seems like it always has to be destroyed. Once they destroyed it, it always has to be destroyed. And in the same thing in Star Wars, and I flat out said, okay, and I make fun of it in Control Alt Revolt, and I wrote Control Alt Revolt before Star Wars came out. And I talked about how the franchise always has to blow up something big at the end, and there has to be a revelation that someone is someone's relative. And I was just joking about it. And this, like I said, this was a year before or 6 months before it came out. I had no idea. And lo and behold, they do it. And now I'm wondering, will there always be a Starkiller-based Death Star that has to, an X-Wing fighter attack run? Will there be some new constant revelation? Will Rogue One reveal that this is Rey's grandmother or whatever? Is that what it has to be? And that's my fear of science fiction. In that science fiction used to be wildly unpopular and totally legit, and as it became sexier and used as a merchandising tool, to the exclusivity now that science fiction is really taking over the entire movie market. It's getting super cliche, and when I saw The Last Avengers, it was so downbeat and not fun. It made me wonder how it justified more movies.
Well, yeah, go ahead, Danny Warpig.
I want to say this. I want to blow your mind about J.J. Abrams by saying this.
Okay.
J.J. Abrams does badly what James Cameron does well.
Yeah.
James Cameron, when he made Aliens from Ridley Scott's Alien, took all the stuff that was in Alien and gave it a big twist and made it brand new and added a whole bunch of new stuff that was so good and so right that it's still, 20 years later, pretty much the archetype from which all science fiction depictions of military units in sci-fi are based on.
Yes.
And he did the same thing in Terminator 2. He took Terminator 1 and took all the stuff that was there from Terminator 1 and spun it around just enough and made it great and new. J.J. Abrams, in both Into Darkness and The Force Awakens, took the stuff from Star Trek and Star Wars and spun them around into something new, but it was something new and something kind of mediocre, and it felt regurgitated. It felt retreaded. It just felt like a lifeless remake where you took all the same ingredients and didn't really do anything interesting with them. So
exactly.
my thesis is J.J. Abrams does the same things that Cameron does, but just doesn't do as good a job at it.
Yeah. So the two takeaways I get from that is we need to hire James Cameron and give him whatever he wants to fix both these franchises, and David Fincher should be allowed nowhere near either franchise.
Something, James Cameron is the architect of, I think if you're a fan of movies, you all have, you have a couple of those moments that you can vividly remember where you're sitting in a theater and you think to yourself, this is why I go to the movies. This is beautifully done movie magic, and you're just so enveloped in it. And I will never forget seeing The Abyss and just being so blown away by that movie that it's one of those times that I just look back on, and one of the best times I've ever had in a theater, I think.
I'm still pissed that The Abyss and True Lies are not available to buy on iTunes. I'm mad. I get mad about that every time I think about it.
That's weird, and it's weird that they never followed up True Lies with anything more because it just seemed for Schwarzenegger a perfect vehicle, but really his career kind of really goes sideways after that.
Yeah, it really does. You know, well, something I watched Schwarzenegger's movie last night, the new one. I don't even know if it hit theaters, but it was called Maggie.
Yeah, I saw that.
You know what? I didn't think it was that bad. It got savaged. I've seen some reviews that just savaged it, but I didn't think it was that bad. Did you?
I didn't.
I did not watch it because it's just it was one of those things that was a minimal release. I think it was considered too downbeat, you know, and
it was pretty sad. Yeah, it was pretty depressing.
Yeah, but it's weird when James Cameron's always been and I it's interesting remember in Scream the character gives the law of movie sequels. And Aliens is the only movie that ever violates the law of movie sequels in that it's better than the original. Yes, the original is great. It's awesome. Yeah. But Aliens is hands down, you know, so Aliens is almost a completely new movie.
Yeah,
so
totally agree.
It's awesome. And when I was writing Soda Pop Soldier, I think Daddy Warpig may have worded that. I did a whole homage to Aliens and went in and did all this crazy research about it. And one of the crazy things that you learn about Aliens is they're shooting in England out in this rainy studio and the crew is pissed off. And they love Alien and they see what Cameron's doing and they think they mutiny. And the first Hicks walks off the set or gets fired, and it was Dexter's dad, who was also in 48 Hours.
Oh,
and but they think this is crap. They hate everything he's doing and how he wrote it. And he went in and it was all about the Vietnam War. He wanted to write about a small group of people being surrounded and outnumbered. That's why the dropship is a cross between a Cobra and an F-4 Phantom, even down to the parts that they use to model it. So anyways, the crew mutinies. They're like, it's such a bad, hostile environment. And they bring in Terminator, and they say, this is the other movie he made. It hasn't been released yet. And they show it to the crew, and they go, okay, we get it now. And everything's happy after that.
Boy, what a part to walk away from, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Don't get me wrong, I love 48 Hours. I saw that in the drive-in, I think, when I was a kid, but I really liked it.
I think he wanted to act, you know, which is this weird disease that actors get when they've kind of got some mojo going. They're like, I'm an actor, and they forget, like, but you actually are just a guy. You know, Jay Leno has this great, you know, line about doing what you do. It's called tell joke, get check, and it's the same thing. You know, just act, get check. But occasionally actors will think, and I think that's kind of what happened. He differed in how he wanted to portray the part with Cameron, and that's weird. Like, that's a lot of Cameron's life in Hollywood is having these battles where he generally turns out to be like right. Remember with Titanic, they wanted to take the film away from him, and he said, "I'll do it for free unless it hits $1 billion, and then you got to pay me double."
Right, right.
Yeah, and it hits $1 billion like 2 weeks later.
Well, you know, I love James Cameron's work, and he's absolutely one of my favorites. But I definitely, you know, and this is kind of a funny story. I veer off the path with Avatar, where I just don't like it. I don't get it. I don't understand. I mean, visually stunning, but there has to be more to. I mean, it's like the hot girl you bring to the prom. You don't really want to talk to her the next day. She's all. It's just this visually beautiful movie, but it's just empty to me. I didn't like it. It was a shell of a plot, and it was done before, and it just kind of felt like it had that undertone of, you know, we're destroying the earth, that the conservatives are going to tear down trees. It all felt kind of political and hackneyed to me.
He had gone to the SJW Kamikaze meeting, and they said unlimited budget, but you got to get it onto the deck of the carrier, and he said bonsai.
Yeah, exactly. So we about 2 months ago, we go to Florida to, you know, Disney World, and we go into the MGM Studios and Animal Kingdom there, and there's a whole section of it kind of boarded away, and they're obviously building something that looks quite large. And so I start to investigate, and I tell my wife, I said, "Oh, they're building Avatar Land over there," and she said, "Dear God, why?
Why would they do this thing?
I don't understand. Of all the movie franchises, why that one?"
Starting in 2017, they're going to be releasing one Avatar movie a year for 4 years.
Yeah, he's going to get four movies to touch that up.
Yeah, count me out. I'm out on those. I'm not doing that.
I think this is the same group of people that were behind the Hitch DVD marketing campaign. You didn't want to see it in theaters. Now you can own it on DVD.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Which works for some movies, but not a lot.
Not a lot. Exactly. I don't think it worked for Hitch either.
We want you to be disappointed at home, not in the theaters. That's the point. And then if you own it, you can just be disappointed over and over and over again.
Exactly.
I don't know. It's funny you say that about Dexter's father. I didn't know that story, so that's kind of intriguing to me that he would walk away from that part. But
yeah, and then the weird thing is, all the actors have kind of interesting stories. But who was it? Was it one of the minor guys? Because you hear all their names and everything like that. I think he's the first guy to kind of get dragged up and away. He was like an SAS guy, like British Secret Special Forces, and he taught them all how to be soldiers. And they kept him alive, I think, for a few scenes, just because it was better to keep him around. But he was like the only badass in the whole thing. But like he was the real deal.
I didn't know that either. That's very interesting.
Are you talking about Apone?
Not Apone, but he's like an ordinary. I don't even think he has a line in there. He's just like an ordinary gringo, but white guy. I forget. But the Aliens trivia is just like super fascinating. Like a lot of the stuff that went on and how they did things and why he chose to do things. It's really fascinating. But I love. Because I was in the military, people will see, nowadays it's less prevalent for people to be in, and they'll say, "How was the military?" And I always quote Apone's line, which was, "Every meal a banquet, every formation a parade." And they just kind of look at me, and then I go, "Look into my eye."
Well, I always wanted to ask someone in Hollywood, an actor, what do you think? Because this occurs to me because of the way he walked away from that part. What do you think of when you see a star walk away from a show that's a huge success, like Cody DiPablo, leaving NCIS because she wants to branch out into other characters, or like when Grissom left CSI? Do you always think, wow, those guys are crazy, or do you think bravo for their integrity and they want to?
David Caruso.
Oh, David Caruso. I mean, at least he was heard from again. Some of these people, I don't know what Cody DiPablo is doing. I haven't seen her since.
Say line, get check. It's kind of a weird moment, and again, my career never arced to that point, but I did know people, and you do know things, and you do see, like I played Secret Service on West Wing when Rob Lowe was on West Wing, and he was, like right next to me talking to his agent, and they were talking about him getting paid more because everybody else on the show got a Best Supporting Emmy, but he didn't because he was actually the show lead technically. So it's weird other stuff that goes into it, but the truth of it is the shelf life of an actor, and the shelf life, even more importantly, of a female actor is lethally small. And you have this moment in time to do things, and it requires sort of energy and momentum and those kinds of things, but a lot of the times it comes down to this choice. Do you want to go this way or that way? And, you're going to go make Snake Eyes with Nick Cage, and it's going to be a huge film because Nick Cage has got an Oscar and he's making, The Rock, and it's so hot. And then it just turns out to be a horrible train wreck because Nick Cage just wants to choose scenery, and you just bet everything on it, which was, I think, the David Caruso thing. So no one knows. And there's all these, I think most actors come out of, you're desperate and you'll do anything, and you do a lot of anything, and you want more. You want to go up, you want to go from TVs to movie to those kinds of things, but it's just very hard. But then there's another side of it too. Like like you take Ally McBeal, which was this huge show, this phenomenon, basically put Starbucks on the map and all these kinds of things. And then by the end of the show, and I've heard Cheers was the same way, the actors couldn't stand to be there because they had so much money and they'd worked, long and hard, and they don't want to be there anymore. And then, Seinfeld will talk about they offered him $12 million an episode the last season. So a lot of it is, you make so much money and now you want to go play with it and have fun and have a life, and you've kind of done everything that you can. But that's not really old school Hollywood like Johnny Carson, where you're going to show up night after night for 35 years.
Right.
So I don't understand, but it's weird when it works out badly. It's weird when people walk away from successful things because they're going to get other stuff. Sort of the worker in me said, we'll just try to do everything, but maybe that's not possible. So I don't know.
I always thought that there would be sort of a nobility in being part of a franchise so successful that it's bound to go down in pop culture lore, like to be on a Cheers, something that's going to live on for 30, 40 years. People are still going to be watching Seinfeld in 50 years. I mean, CSI, even to an extent, for a long time was the most successful show on television. And just to be attached to something, or the Rockford Files, I bet if you went back, and had a seance and could ask Jim Garner if he regretted being on the Rockford Files, because I know he had a lot of issues with the money he was making on that show. And I bet he would look back on it now and say, well, yeah, of course. People still watch that show 50 years later, and it's it's sort of iconic. To be a part of something iconic and to walk away from it, to me, just kind of baffles me. But maybe because I've never had that kind of acting success, I just don't understand it.
Well, here's a weird thing to consider, and I was just reading an article about Woody Allen's new movie that was coming out, and it reminded me of this. He's never watched any of his movies after releasing them. He doesn't have and he said, I don't have the fondness that the public has for my movies. I don't go back and watch them. I don't want to look at them. And I know that as an actor, like, you look at yourself, and every actor feels this way. Even though you might think, like Matt Damon thinks or Brad Pitt thinks, man, I look good, every woman wants me. They don't see that. They go, look at that freak troll up there with his mouth moving. I want to punch him in the face. That's how every actor now, you can't stand to watch yourself, and now magnify that 80 feet high and 40 feet wide. And so when they're offered an out of, like, you've made a lot of money, and it's weird. What I'm trying to say, like, sometimes they don't enjoy the experience as much as you're enjoying watching it, as we're enjoying watching it.
Right.
And so they get into these fights over money because they're like, you're gonna have to pay me more to continue doing this because I loathe doing this. And they loathe it for the right reason, and that only a complete narcissist would want to watch yourself up there. That's kind of the really wacky thing. Only a truly dysfunctional person would enjoy making a spectacle of themselves. So
right.
it kind of commends their humanity.
Yeah. Do you feel the same way about your writing as you do about your acting? Like, when you see yourself on the big screen and you think, oh, that wasn't too good. Do you read your book and you put it down and say, oh God, no one's gonna like this? But do you have that kind of feeling about it?
No, because I have absolutely the right perspective on my writing that I probably should have had on my acting. But my perspective for my writing is it's totally a God thing. I pray before I write. I pray after my write. And I see, when you read Stephen King's book on writing, he talks about writing being a roller coaster and being open to another source, being open to a higher power. And so that, when I look at my writing, it's totally a God thing. I see things and connections I never made, and I see nuances and things like that. And so it's very easy for me to turn around and give God all the glory and just say, thank you. There's very little of me in it. And maybe if I would have had that as an actor, or actors would have that, they would loathe themselves less, because when it's all about you, it's too weird, and I think if I did think that, like, look at me, I'm writing all that, I would, if I wrote like that and I said, man, I did, and people, write me and they're like, I love what you did here, and I love this, and I have a lot of women who like me writing about gamer fiction or zombies, but they like the characters that I like. I remember one of the first comments I got from an editor, a line editor at HarperCollins, when I wrote The Old Man in the Wasteland Saga, and I finished the trio. Like, and I think it was really probably not right for her to do or whatever, but she left this little penciled note in the margin, and she said, "I think I'm in love with the old man." And so I can look and just say, that's not me, that's all God. But if I was the kind of person who took like massive amounts of credit for that, I would be like some kind of weird, freaky narcissist. But then you look at some of the star meltdowns, people who have it all, and they get into drugs, or they have these huge, epic meltdowns, Miley Cyrus or Britney. I think a lot of the times that's people who begin to believe the hype that Patton was talking about in the beginning of Patton. That's why you need a slave whispering, "This is not legit. You don't deserve this." And in Hollywood, you have the opposite of that. You have people that are willing to tell you in entourages, and that's totally true, that there's nothing. It's what we have with our president. We have a group of people telling him that he's absolutely the second coming, and he's the greatest president ever, and he's failed to accomplish anything meaningful, and has actually been quite destructive. But now you're going to see this whole narrative come in, and everybody's going. They've only, in my opinion, are only considering Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump to be the next president, because both of them will be so horrible they'll make Obama look good, so that the narrative can be. And I know that's totally conspiratorial, but. You don't want to be that narcissist. You don't want to be that person that can't be told you don't have any clothes on. And I love the camera because I can look at it and say, man, that guy's ugly.
Nick, now that you're on the show, I'm going to tell you a story because I think it will amuse you.
Yes.
I don't generally tell it, but, screw it. I usually don't tell personal stories on the show because I generally think that bores the shit out of people and I'm not all that interesting. But because you're from Hollywood, I'll tell you.
All right.
When I was younger, one of the first jobs I had was at a public relations firm, and we did, and I was, believe me, a junior PR guy there. I was right out of college. And we did public relations for a film festival. It was the first time the festival had been in existence, the very first year. And they had somehow convinced Burt Reynolds to accept a Lifetime Achievement Award.
Awesome.
From the festival. Now, I don't know why he decided he was going to do it, or we were all baffled that he said yes. Okay, so he was going to come down and he's going to accept this award. So I go to the festival and I meet Burt Reynolds like I'm supposed to with my boss, and we start talking to him, and he's very nice. Smaller than I thought he would be. I mean, I knew he was short, but he's shorter even than I thought. And very nice guy, and his publicist is there, and he keeps. All right, during the question and answer session, there cannot be any questions about Lonnie Anderson. This interview is over. And my boss looks at me and she says, "Lonnie Anderson, what year does this guy think it is?" It was 2003.
That's awesome.
And he's like, "Well, I don't understand why he keeps saying this." So then he says there was an odd amount of people who showed up to the festival, but not many in the press, for I don't know why. So there was maybe 3 or 4 reporters in the room, and now my boss is getting nervous, and she says to the publisher says to her, "Let us know when the press is here." And she says to me, "Well, shit, the press is here. This is everybody. No one else is here." So she grabs me outside, and of course we were responsible for getting media coverage, and she's all in a tizzy and really mad. And she says, "You got to fix this. You got to there's got to be press here for Mr. Reynolds, or he's going nuts." So I couldn't think of what to do, and she says, "He's going to be embarrassed. I'm going to be embarrassed, and you're going to be fired." I'm like, "Well, all right, shit, okay." So I God forbid I would never have told her this. I ran over to the CVS. I bought notepads and pens. Then I went to the diner next door, and I found as many people as I could who looked like they were intelligent and well-dressed, and I asked them if they'd like to meet Burt Reynolds and like to ask a question.
That's awesome.
And I gave them a pen and a notepad, and I brought them into the room. So I brought back 10 people. I said, "Oh, here's the press. They're going to ask them questions."
That is an excellent cocktail story. And that's how it is. It's weird. You have to be complicit in propping up people's ego.
Did anybody ask about Lonnie Anderson?
Half of the people I brought in there wouldn't have known who Lonnie Anderson was. They were in their 20s, I mean, jeez.
It's weird. I have a Burt Reynolds story, but it doesn't involve Burt directly, but it kind of does. But I was working as a PA when I first got out of the Army for NBC, and it was this show with the lady who I think she just died. Um, uh, and she was, oh man, anyways, she was like a nurse who died of pills. She was like an old Disney actress. I forget her name. And it was her TV show, and this is like 1993, and they were shooting pilots and everything like that. And so a PA, your job is to run all over Hollywood doing stupid stuff, like taking audio tapes to the composer and taking scripts to stars and setting up a million folding chairs, and that's your job. And so I had one day like 10 tasks, and one of my tasks was go to this agent's office, which is Burt Reynolds' agent's office, and give him a script, because he was going to play like a wacky televangelist kind of preacher on the show. Mm-hmm. And so in my limited PA sense, and this would be like 1993, so Burt was like really on the wane. He hadn't done Boogie Nights and had like a little minor career revival. He was just totally out to pasture. And so I looked at all my tasks from like run the edits over to the airport and take the music to the composer, and I assigned like a level of priority, and I put Burt at number 10 because I felt all these things were more important. And so in my little like nobody PA way, I ranked his celebrity, and I ranked it 10. And so about task number 4, they start texting me, and this is the age of pagers. And they start, you got to call in. And I call in. They're like, Burt is in his agent's office, and he is angry. And you need to get that script over there. And I think I blew him off and went and did 3 other tasks because I said to myself, Burt's not important. And I think I got fired.
That is a great story.
Burt's not important. Like I'm making like $75 a day as a PA, and I'm probably high. And I'm just, I'm the absolute bottom of the barrel of Hollywood. And I'm deciding that Burt's star power isn't high enough for him to get a script.
I'll tell you something, man. I'm not ashamed to say it. Burt Reynolds, the movies that he made in the 80s, like Stick and a bunch of the other ones, as cheesy and goofy as some of them were, he definitely had a presence, man. And I always enjoyed him.
Yeah, he was totally great. I mean, like, I think there was like, a lot of off-screen shenanigans and weirdness and ego and blah, blah, blah. But it's a culture of ego, and it's weird. Like
Cannonball Run.
How about this?
Oh, yeah.
Gator.
I saw that.
Gator was awesome I think Jerry Reed's bad in Gator.
I'm looking that up right now. I think Daddy Warpig, no way you saw that, right?
Gator, I have not seen.
Gator Burt is a bootlegger in the swamps of Florida.
Jack Weston, Lauren Hutton.
Oh,
Jerry Reed is in it. Yeah, Jerry Reed's in it too. Yep.
Yeah, I think Jerry Reed's a heavy, and I think that was the first movie I ever saw someone use a sawed-off shotgun, and it made a big impact on me and probably laid the groundwork for Mad Max.
Jeez, I haven't seen that in a long time.
Mad Max, really?
That again. Mad Max, yeah. It was Stick I was thinking of with Candice Bergen. That's what's his name? Jason Statham just remade that. It's based on a novel, so he just remade it, and man, was it butchered. Man, was it? What are you looking forward to coming up in the movies?
I definitely am interested to see where the Mad Max. I think it's going to be a trilogy, maybe. I'm definitely that was the movie of the year for me last year. I'll definitely go see Civil War just to tune in on that. But and Star Trek. But honestly, Rogue One. So pretty much the usual fare. I'm gonna go see Woody Allen's Cafe Society because I like Woody Allen movies on a Sunday afternoon.
See, I don't have a long time to wait for my movie. I'm excited to.
What's yours?
Civil War.
Oh, is that the one you're after? Okay. I thought you didn't like the last Avengers, did you?
I didn't like Ultron, but Civil War looks like it's going to be a lot better than Ultron.
I thought Civil War comes out next month.
No, it comes out Thursday, actually.
Oh, okay, good. Well, then.
Like I said, I don't have long to wait. It's coming out more.
Hey, Warpig, have you seen Deadpool yet?
Yes, I watched Deadpool yesterday.
And did you love it as much as I did, or no?
I'm
And
trying to
Nick,
see
I don't know if
this.
you saw it, but
It was too naughty for me.
all right.
I opt out of the naughty stuff.
See, there was a lot of genius stuff in it. There was some stuff in it that were over the line that I couldn't watch it a whole lot precisely for what Nick just said.
So if it was a PG movie, you would have liked it better.
Yeah, if they had the blood didn't bother me, the violence didn't bother me, even the language was fine. The sex scenes in the nudity were too much. Sorry.
Alrighty. Well, let's see. Nick, we've had you for about 2 hours, so I don't know if you want to donate any more time than that.
I probably better get some. I'm down to about 14% on my phone, and I probably better get some dinner in me. But
All right. Well, listen. Can we have you back or what? Because you were great.
Yeah, I would love to. Anytime you guys want.
Well, we do this every Wednesday, and so anytime that I don't want to, badger you like every week. You want to come on. Anytime you want to come on, you just shoot me a direct message, and I would love to have you on. Every Wednesday at 8, we do it.
Oh, hey, Jason, Dan, thank you guys so much. That's so nice.
If you need to know where to send my autographed copy of Control Alt Revolt, I can just DM you my address.
Oh, dude, seriously, I have sitting in front of me on my bookshelf 5, I think. Am I wrong? Is it 5? Is it more than 5?
I think I sent you everything I had. I've written 9.
Okay, yeah. I've got 5 autographed copies of Nick Cole books.
Well, I guess you're just more important than me, huh?
You just give it away. Dan, DM me your address. I'd love to.
Absolutely, I will do that, and I really look forward to reading it. Just so everyone who's listening and who will listen, usually most of our listeners come afterwards. They get this on YouTube later, but your book is out now?
It is. It's been out. Yeah, it's been out since February 8th. I think it's sitting at about. It hung out in the low thousands for a while. It's maybe 7,000 right now on Amazon, and it's got about 226 reviews. I think 90% of which are 5 stars. But there are a few like 1-star reviews that by people who didn't actually read it. But one of my favorite reviews by the SJWs was, and this is a big word. Your wife will love this. Bro gamer fetishistic fiction.
Oh, for God's sake!
I literally wanted to I need to put that on the cover.
I keep on like tweeting out and posting on Facebook. I keep on trying to rewrite the summary of it that I post so I can get the gamers I know, because I know a ton of gamers now in Gamergate. I try to keep on rewriting the summary to get them to read Soda Pop Soldier and Control Alt Revolt, because they're genius books that I think gamers would love. And I haven't gotten any response from them. Nobody says, "Oh, that sounds great. I'll go read it." I'm like, what do I have to say?
They will now. I think they will now that he stuck up to a publisher and stuck by his guns. I think he's going to get a lot of cred.
I always thought Call of Duty meets Diablo would sell it, but then everybody's so angry about the upcoming Call of Duty. I don't know.
Call of Duty meets Diablo is a good description. All right, well, 2 hours. Nick, I will DM you my address, and I really look forward to reading the book, and I thank you so much for sending it. But it's been a real pleasure having you on. You are just really interesting, and I could do this for 4 hours.
Thank you. And I don't say this in any weird way, but I love you guys. That was actually fun.
Thank you. Great time. And everyone, that's Arthur Nick Cole, his book, Control Alt Revolt. You can get it on Amazon. Please go get it right now.